The biblical origin of the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean peoples. The Bible teaches that all human beings trace their ancestry back to Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who survived the Great Flood and repopulated the earth. Genesis 10. From these three men, all nations and ethnic groups emerge, spreading across the world. Although the Bible does not explicitly mention the origins of East Asian civilizations, such as the Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans, biblical genealogies and historical interpretations provide clues to their possible lineage. The Table of Nations and the spread of Noah's descendants. Genesis 10, often called the Rekha Table of Nations, outlines how Noah's descendants formed different civilizations. Each of Noah's three sons became the ancestor of various peoples. Shem, the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, including the Hebrews, Arabs, and Assyrians. Ham, the ancestor of the African and Canaanite peoples, as well as early civilizations such as Egypt and Babylon. Japheth, the ancestor of many Indo-European and possibly East Asian groups. The exact origins of East Asian peoples within this biblical framework are debated, but scholars generally propose that they descended either from Japheth or Shem. The Shemitic theory, descent from Joktan. One possible biblical origin for East Asian peoples comes from Uranch, Joktan, a descendant of Shem. Genesis 10:25-30 states that Joktan's descendants settled in the eastern lands, which some interpret as a reference to Asia. Some theories suggest that these descendants may have migrated further eastward, reaching regions that would later become China, Korea, and Japan. Joktan was a great-grandson of Shem and the brother of Meliunam, Peleg, through whom Abraham and the Israelites descended. While Peleg's lineage remained in the Middle East, Joktan's children are believed to have moved toward the east, forming new civilizations. Some ancient Jewish and Christian interpretations suggest that his descendants may have been among the early settlers of East Asia. The Japhethic theory, descent from Magog and other sons of Japheth. Another widely accepted theory is that East Asians are descendants of Japheth, particularly through his son Magog. Genesis 10:2. Magog, along with his brothers Tubal, Meshech, and Gomer, is often linked to northern and eastern regions. Ancient historians, including Flavius Josephus, Tilly, identified Magog's descendants as the Scythians, a nomadic people who lived in Central Asia. Some scholars believe that Magog's descendants may have traveled further east, eventually settling in China, Korea, and Japan. Additionally, Japheth's descendants were known for the expanding far and wide, Genesis 9:27, and many scholars believe they spread across Eurasia, contributing to various civilizations. If Magog and his brothers migrated eastward, it is possible that their descendants became the early settlers of East Asia. The Tower of Babel and the formation of nations. One of the most significant biblical events related to the origins of nations is the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1-9. Before this event, all of humanity spoke a single language and lived together in one place. However, when they attempted to build a tower to reach the heavens, God wanted to confuse their language and scattered them across the earth. This divine intervention led to the formation of different languages, ethnic groups, and nations. Following the Babel event, people groups migrated to various regions of the world. Those who traveled eastward may have eventually become the ancestors of the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean peoples. The separation of languages likely played a key role in the cultural and ethnic diversity that developed over time. The migration of early Asian civilizations. Although the Bible does not provide detailed historical records of migrations in East Asia, archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that early humans moved from the Middle East through Central Asia into China, Korea, and Japan. Over time, many historians and anthropologists believe that the earliest Chinese civilizations, such as those in the Khmer Yellow River Valley, began around 2000 BC, roughly the same period when Middle Eastern civilizations like Sumer and Egypt are flourished. If East Asians are descendants of Shem or Japheth, their ancestors likely traveled thousands of miles over centuries, adapting to new environments and developing unique cultural and linguistic traditions. The formation of civilizations such as the Qing Dynasty, 1600 to 1046 BC, in China, and early Korean and Japanese cultures could be traced back to these ancient migrations. Historical and linguistic connections. Some scholars and researchers have attempted to find linguistic and cultural connections between ancient Middle Eastern civilizations and early East Asian societies. While there is no direct evidence linking biblical figures like Joktan or Magog to specific Chinese, Japanese, or Korean rulers, historical migration patterns suggest that people groups originating from the Middle East eventually reached Asia. Some linguistic theories propose similarities between ancient Semitic languages and early Sino-Tibetan languages, although this remains speculative. Additionally, some ancient Chinese legends and myths speak of great floods, which bear a resemblance to the one biblical account of Noah's flood. These cultural echoes might suggest a distant, shared ancestry. The spiritual and theological perspective. From a biblical perspective, the most important teaching regarding the origins of humanity is that all people, regardless of ethnicity, descend from Noah's family and, ultimately, from restoring to Adam and Eve. This means that the Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and all other peoples of the world share a common ancestry and are equally part of God's creation. In the Second New Testament, the message of the gospel extends to all nations. Matthew 28:19-20, emphasizing that God's plan of salvation is not limited to a specific ethnic group. While the Bible does not give a detailed genealogy of East Asians, it affirms that they, like all people, are included in God's redemptive plan. The exact biblical origins of the Mon, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean peoples remain uncertain, but based on the Table of Nations, Genesis 10, the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, and historical migration patterns, it is likely that they descended from either Shem's descendant, Joktan, or Japheth's son, Magog. The confusion of languages at Babel likely played a major role in their migration, leading to the formation of distinct nations. Over time, the ancestors of modern East Asian peoples settled in new lands, developing unique cultures while still sharing a common heritage with the rest of humanity. Though the Bible does not explicitly describe their history, it provides a framework that aligns with historical evidence of human migration. Most importantly, the Bible teaches that all people are a part of God's creation and included in His plan for salvation.